China have frozen new investment plans with tariffs and U.S.-China relations among their top concerns. And this is according to a U.S.-China Business Council survey. Joining us now to discuss is Daniel Lacalle. He's the chief economist at Tressis and author of the book Freedom or Equality. Good afternoon, Daniel. Always good to see you. So the survey apparently shows a dramatic jump in companies not choosing to invest in China, rising from 20% to 52% in just a year. So what do you think, why do you think we're seeing a record high number of U.S. companies, freezing new investment in China?
Thank you, Don. There are a number of important factors, and not all of them are related to trade or tariffs. There's been a growing concern among the business community about legal and investor security in China. The risk of losing control of intellectual property, the problems of working capital, the challenges of overcapacity, copying trademark and different industrial products. All these factors are among the reasons why U.S. companies have decided to move their investments to other nations, particularly, I would say, the closer to India, for example, or other countries, no? Even closer to the United States, the so-called nearshoring. So I would say that there are three reasons. Number one is obviously that the trade agreement between the United States and China assumes that China will continue with the elevated problems that many companies find with capital controls, currency exchange controls, and lack of legal and investor security. So very few of these elements have been improved or lifted. The second is that a lot of companies are finding more let's say, profitable or at least less costly opportunities to invest in other countries in which financing and where overcapacity is not are not issues. No, and the third one is nearshoring, is trying to get supply chains closer to the final customer. So all those things are put together in something that already started prior to COVID in 2019.
So, Daniel, when I was looking at this survey, maybe I perhaps thought that this was more sort of a short-term uncertainty is due to that. But from what you're hearing, it could potentially be a long-term thing where investment keeps freezing.
I think that it's much more concerning than just a short-term impact from trade negotiations. If you think about it, in the past 8 to 9 years, we have seen that the Chinese economy, instead of opening, instead of lifting capital controls, lifting the currency controls, instead of lifting the barriers to finance and the challenges for legal and investor security in terms of intellectual property, what we have seen is the opposite. We have seen that the Chinese economy has been closing quite significantly and has been reaching strategic agreements with countries that also have significant trade and legal and investor barriers. So for U.S. companies, that is a very difficult environment to work in. And if we add to all those factors that it is not a cheap let's say, labor and cheap cost country anymore, then all those things get together to show that it's a more long-term trend than a short-term impact from a trade negotiation.
So you mentioned the economy. Actually, the survey also talks about deflation in a number of sectors. So my question to you is, China's slowing economy, would you say it's more structural or cyclical? If it's cyclical, it means that it can recover in the future.
Well, obviously, oh, bloody hell.
I can still hear you, Daniel.
Oh, sorry, there was a blip here. No, as I said, what we have seen is that for example, for it to be a cyclical element, obviously, we need to look at a more sort of longer term perspective. The big challenge of the Chinese economy is a combination of the enormous overcapacity in industry, as well as the challenges that we see, for example, in the real estate sector and the banking sector. So all those elements are not something that is going to be sorted out quickly. We have to remember that the real estate bubble of the Chinese economy is the largest ever, and that the wave of bankruptcies, the wave of working capital challenges that we have seen in the past years is something that even the Chinese government is acknowledging and trying to address in a sort of a quiet way. But when you have such an important problem of both overcapacity and at the same time a problem of real estate challenges of this magnitude, obviously what the government is going to have to understand is that it's going to take much longer than 1 year or 2 years. The only way in which it could take 1 year or 2 years is if the government accepted a massive crisis. Because the government does not want a massive crisis and wants to deal with the problem slowly and gradually, that is obviously going to make the cleanup more prolonged, and certainly it's going to take, in the words of the government itself, at least 5 years to recover.
Okay, so in the beginning you mentioned companies are operating in China or freezing their investments because of mainly 3 reasons. So keeping that in mind, in the survey it said nearly all respondents say their China operations are still vital to their global competitiveness. So can you talk to us about this sort of opposing forces where companies are concerned on one hand, and on the other hand, they're saying they still need this market?
Yeah. Well, I think it's perfectly logical. Supply chains are becoming more complex, and the concept of nearshoring and the concept of getting as much as possible of the supply chain as close to the final market as possible remains. Therefore, China is an important market, and therefore investment in China is going to remain, but not as the sort of central point for the rest of the world, you see? So it's basically China will continue to be a headquarter for investment that in order to address the needs of customers in China, Hong Kong, and probably the neighboring countries in Asia. And at the same time, many of these companies, because of all those challenges, are going to prefer to move a significant part of their manufacturing elsewhere, closer to the rest of customers. So instead of having all of the supply chain within China and then exported to the world, is basically disaggregating the supply chain and making it more flexible and more complex.
Okay, I'll just end today's conversation with this question. Do you think there is room for mutual economic benefit between the 2 countries, that is China and the United States, under the current Chinese communist regime?
It is a challenge, but it can be, there can be a compromise, but it's obviously going to continue to be a challenge because of the elements that I mentioned prior: capital controls, currency controls, legal and investor security. The United States is used to working with countries in which legal and investor security are fully independent from the government, in which there is private property and intellectual property rights that are fully committed and fully respected, and in which there is free and open markets. Those things are very challenging, and the reason why the Chinese government has accepted higher tariffs than many would have thought a few months ago is because it prefers to keep those barriers than to lift them and then not have those tariffs.
Well, all right, Daniel, it's always good to talk to you. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Coming up, Alaska Airlines resumes flights after grounding its entire fleet. The carrier says